I'm Velma Tollison. I'm the growth manager at Travel Quest Network. And today I'm speaking with Amy Little. She is the owner of Cobblestones and Cafes, a very successful agency. And also, which is most of the time more important to me personally, she is a agency service specialist and one of my go-tos when I can't figure something out. And I know the members feel the same way. So Amy has been a member of Travel Quest since the end of 2011, and then also agreed to help us out on our support desk almost 2 years ago. And Amy,
Time's flying by.
I'm gonna ask you some things later on about your agency and get into some things, but the most important thing that our members want to know, and I do too, is how you became a wedding destination specialist. And
Mhm.
if someone contacts you with a request, how do you get started
Mhm.
and how do you operate that to the end?
Sure. So I became a wedding specialist. It kind of fell in my lap, per se. So my first client was they were celebrating their anniversary,
Mhm,
and then I got recommended to a client who then wanted a destination wedding, and then that turned into a honeymoon,
mhm,
and it kind of snowballed from there. And then you get more referrals, you start
okay.
advertising, and oh, my cousin's getting married, my friend's getting married. So that's kind of how I became the destination wedding honeymoon specialist.
Wow.
So yeah, a lot of my clients just started referring me out, and by word of mouth, it built up.
Mhm.
So when somebody contacts me to do a destination wedding, I schedule a phone call with them to have a consultation because there's a lot involved when it comes to a destination
That's
wedding.
true.
So first of all, you kind of have to land on a place, like where do they want to get married? Because depending on where they're getting married is going to depend on the rules of what can or cannot happen,
Oh, yeah,
whether they're having a symbolic wedding
that's important.
or
Mhm.
absolutely. So, and a lot of people don't know that. They think they can just go anywhere. You have a,
Boy.
minister or
Mhm.
a priest or whomever, and that's not how it works. So there's also paperwork involved depending on the country, and you have to fly in so many days ahead of time depending on where you're going. So those are all great rules to look at when clients are deciding when and where they're getting married.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of mine are Caribbean, so St. Lucia, Mexico, Dominican, things like that.
Mhm.
So I also ask, are they wanting to be married on site or off site? A lot of my brides actually like to get married off property.
Oh,
And
I did not know that. Oh.
yeah, so, they don't like all the people around them. And even though
Uh-huh.
some of these resorts have, and I do have people get married on property, obviously,
Mhm.
but even though the properties have, gorgeous areas and courtyards and gazebos and gardens,
Wow.
um, depending on the location, sometimes they like to get married off property. So, for instance, she was actually my best friend. Since we were kids, her wedding was in St. Lucia, and we had it. We stayed at the Royalton, but we had the wedding in Pigeon Island, and it's really cool because you still have the old barracks and some of the relics left, and it's in the evening, so the park's closed to the public.
Mhm.
So we have the whole park to ourselves, and we had the a wedding concierge help us bring in like
Mhm.
decor and obviously the caterer and everything like that. So those are things you want to ask. Are you wanting to get married on property or off property? And if on property, what are things that you're looking for in your wedding? Like, are you wanting a beachfront location, a garden location? How many people are you thinking are coming? And that's a big question to ask up front because everybody has a long list of people they're inviting. Well, usually. Sometimes that list doesn't always go to fruition, because not everybody wants to travel or can't travel or pay to travel. So, kind of thinking about where you want to start. So, if the bride is really excited and thinking all those people are going to come, it's best to go ahead and hold those rooms and work, with a supplier to start a group inventory. And it can be hotel only or hotel and air, depending on your preference.
So
A lot of
I want to
my
make sure I understand that part. You go ahead and you
Mhm.
block the space with what they hope or think it might be, but you make
Correct.
sure you have a contract that will let you reduce that down when it becomes a
Absolutely.
reality? Okay, good.
Yeah, so when you're working with a group, it's very you can do two different groups. You can do where you hold the rooms, or some of the suppliers will give you like a promo code. So whenever somebody's wanting to book, you book the room and the if it's available, and their price will be whatever it is with that promo code at the time. Where if you're wanting everybody to have the same rate and you want to make sure those rooms are guaranteed because the bride may think 100 people are coming.
Yes.
So you want to hold 50 rooms, that's the contract that you would go for, would be one that you could reserve the rooms ahead of time. But it's very important that you work with the supplier to have a contract that will give you attrition rates so you can drop those rooms by a certain date without penalty.
Yes.
And it's key to stay on top of your date. I actually backdate mine by 2 weeks
Good.
because I don't want to be holding on to rooms that I know are probably not going to be booked because I can see that, maybe we've booked 5 rooms or 10 rooms. Well, I have 50 on hold. I'm going to want to start releasing those rooms or really and ramping up the emails or having the bride be the Pied Piper. Like, these rooms are on hold. They need to be booked. If you're thinking about coming, come now. Like, let's get it booked. And also knowing that the client's cancellation penalty, let's say they go ahead and book, what is the policy if they do cancel?
Yes.
Because that's important as well. So
Yes.
working with a great supplier who can help you with the group and figuring out which group's going to work best for you. Keeping on top of your attrition dates. So maybe backdating it by 2
That is so
weeks.
smart. That is so
Yeah.
smart.
Another Travel Quest Network agent took me under her wing when I started 11 years ago and gave me that advice. Like, I do that even with final payments on regular bookings. I'm usually backing at 1 to 2 weeks because you never know. Something could come up with them or something could happen to you. I mean, I've had emergencies where I'm all of a sudden out of office. Well, if somebody's final payments due that day or gets canceled, then you're responsible. So always give yourself a little wiggle room. So that way you can make sure you drop those rooms being held. And if you're not in a contract where groups aren't being held, then that's okay too. But if you're growing on that instance, you want to kind of keep an eye on the inventory so you can let the bride know, like, this resort's really filling up. If you have people that want to attend your wedding, they probably should book now because there might not be rooms
Has
available.
that ever
So
happened to you where you had someone that chose that and then you couldn't get the hotel where the wedding?
yeah, we've had a couple times where people wanted,
Oh.
like the brother-in-law or,
Uh-huh.
cousin would say, "Oh, I'll just wait and I'll book it my own," or whatever. And then all of a sudden, like a week before the wedding, they've decided to join. Well, there's no
What do
availability.
you do? What do you
So,
do in that
um,
case?
you try to work to see if there's a resort off proper, another resort that they
Nearby.
can stay at.
Mhm.
But then you're having to partner with the resort to see if they can have a day pass to come and attend the wedding because you think
Oh,
most of these are all inclusives. You can't just come and go to a resort unless you're staying there.
right.
So if you do have somebody that has to be off property, you have to work with the wedding coordinator and the resort to make sure that they can get a day pass to
Day
come on
pass.
and that it's long enough for them to be able to enjoy the wedding and the ceremony.
That's
Now, if they're getting married off property, like my friend did in Pigeon Island, then that's no problem. They just
right.
meet you at the wedding.
Right.
But if the wedding's on property, then yes, you would definitely have to coordinate
You
that.
know, that kind of brings up I just want to ask this question while we're talking about this. If it's off site, off property, would that open up where you could maybe block space in different budget categories?
Mhm.
Have you ever done that?
Absolutely.
Or
Yeah,
oh,
so I go through the bride, the different categories, what's available, and
mhm,
most of the time they kind of know where their friends and family have traveled before, or have liked to stay or whatever. So maybe we reserve, a few of the suites or the ocean front, and then we'll reserve a couple of the garden or the lead-in room for people who are, maybe on a lower budget or they've
mhm,
spoken to the bride and said, hey, this isn't a really good time for me right now to travel. However, I really want to see your big day. So I'm just going to go and maybe fly in the day or two before,
mhm.
literally leave the day of or the day after. So, yeah, you can reign. And that's something you want to work with your supplier with to kind of get a broad category of rooms. Now, what I do is I keep an eye out. So if I see that one room category is filling up,
Mhm,
I might reach out to some of the people or have the bride like, hey, if you're interested in this specific category, there's only a couple rooms left. So
mhm.
let us know what room you're thinking about booking, because then I can go back to the supplier and say, hey, can we get rid of the 5 garden rooms that we have? I need 5 more ocean view, because these clients are looking more to ocean view. Or if you're setting on a suite that nobody's booking, get rid of that and maybe add in a few more garden or ocean view or whatever it is. That way you can kind of have different price categories and different types of accommodations for people.
Right.
And it depends too if families are coming. Sometimes then you might have a family suite, you need to accommodate children, or maybe you have grandma, mom, and a daughter staying together, or or if it's a younger couple, sometimes you have a lot of their friends and they want to share rooms. So you might have a couple guys sharing rooms or a couple girls sharing rooms. That's important to think about where you're booking, because I've had brides get married at Sandals and insist on Sandals. Sandals only has king beds. They're for couples. So 2 guys that are fraternity brothers don't always want to share a king size bed, and it's really hard to get rollaways. So those are conversations that you need to think about and have with your bride and groom. Sometimes the grooms participate too. And see exactly like who they're inviting and what the vibe is and their style and things like that, because girls, sometimes they don't care to share, but guys are a little different and they're like, no, I don't want to share a king bed. So, or uncle doesn't want to share a king bed with another uncle. So, I mean, you have different scenarios that you have to think about when you're quoting and working on destination weddings.
Wow, there is a lot to remember here.
Absolutely.
And now
and it's something you learn over time, and you learn from other agents, and you learn, through attending, wedding courses with hotels and resorts. I've been fortunate enough. I went with Bonnie and Walt on an 8-day fam through Jamaica, and it was a complete destination wedding honeymoon fam. That's all it was. So we were meeting with all the different hotels and, attending like what the decor looked like and the chair options and the different options in resorts where they could get married, all the way down to the food and music. And so even working with the wedding coordinators on site gave you ideas of questions that you need to come back and ask your bride and groom or the couple whenever you're working to book a wedding, because there's a lot involved.
That sounds like a
and some are
dream
easy.
fam, especially with Bonnie and Walt. I mean, really?
Well, it was a lot of fun, but I'm not going to lie, exhausting. I think Rayleigh clocked us at 40 miles we walked that week by the time we were done. And there was one day we left at 6:45 in the morning and didn't get back till 10:15. So it was a lot. And keep in mind, like, sometimes we wouldn't take the elevators. We would have to take the stairs because we're there as guests touring. So you don't want to disturb the guests that are actually there paying. So we get lots and lots of notes and learning. And those are all things you learn. And you may have a bride that comes along and says, I'll just, whatever, I'm easy, just get me here and there. But those are still questions that you need to ask. So that you make sure you're set up for success and working with the correct supplier, having the correct group, whether it be blocked rooms or, a promo code, and then your category available. Per room.
Now, Amy, explain, because this gets a little confusing. So you're doing your thing and everything about the trip. How does it tie in with the wedding? Are you involved in those arrangements for the wedding arrangement?
Not usually. So most of the resorts have a wedding department or wedding coordinator. So the bride and groom will work directly with them. And some of them you do receive commission on, and some they get packages based on how many rooms they booked or a cocktail party or something like that. So some resorts will give extra amenities or, offer incentives for having a certain number of rooms. But there's usually a wedding coordinator through the global with that particular resort, like Hyatt, Secrets, Sandals even. So they'll work with them because that's where they're going to pick like their theme or their colors, or where on property they want to get married, the style of the chairs, what they want for their dinner, how they want the reception. So that's all worked through with the wedding department. I just kind of introduced them and like as a liaison. So if the bride feels like she's not getting the response she's wanting from the wedding coordinator, or the wedding coordinator's ghosting her or something like that, then she can reach out to me and I can step in and say, hey, what's happening? Like, my bride's been reaching out to you, or she feels like she's not getting this answer. Can you explain it? And so then I would be the liaison. And then also I will check base with them right before the wedding just to make sure everything's intact. The bride had completed all the paperwork needed. Nothing was forgotten or left, because I don't want them to get there and surprise, you can't get married or something.
Oh my gosh, that would be the worst nightmare.
Yeah. So I usually make a note to check in with the wedding coordinator at least a month beforehand, and then 2 weeks, kind of
Mhm.
just doing a check like I do with my clients leaving, just to make sure it's all
Right.
balanced out.
All
Now, if
ready.
they're getting married off property, that's different. You have to I assist them in finding a wedding coordinator or a wedding department that's on the island or wherever they're going that they can interview and decide whether or not they're going to hire. The company in St. Lucia was a wedding company.
Mhm, mhm,
So we reached come and they same thing. They went through the different what could be brought into,
mhm,
Pigeon Island, and then all the way down to music. Like, we interviewed several violinists and string instruments just to see what type of
mhm,
music my friend wanted, and then setting up for her reception afterwards. They set her up with different caterers that she could interview based on what the food they served and the price. So, but again, she worked with them. I just helped make the connection.
Well, it still sounds though you have to sounds like to be you, even though you're not making those arrangements, you have to really stay involved. And like you say, you're kind of a go-between in case there's an issue. So,
Absolutely,
yeah.
because I feel like, and there might be agents that aren't that involved in it, and there might be some that are more involved in me. It kind of just depends on how you work and what you feel comfortable with. I just like knowing that my bride and groom or couple are being taken care of, and that way everything goes smoothly. Because if something's happening and the wedding's not taking place, that's affecting the whole group that I have booked.
Mhm,
So, making sure everything's checked and balanced is only going to make it all smoother. And you want them to have an enjoyable experience too. If they're having a terrible time with a wedding coordinator, then
right.
they're most likely just going to hate the entire experience, which is going to look bad on you. So being the liaison and the go-between, just kind of giving temperature checks, keeps it a smooth surface. So then you get a good review and you have a good, happy client, and everybody's, excited to go on their trip and
Mhm,
ready to get married and enjoy what should be a beautiful
mhm,
occasion.
mhm. That's true. Yes.
Yeah.
So, just thinking back over the weddings that you've done, how
Mhm.
many have you had going at one time in the same, you know?
So I try to space them out. That's the key, depending on how organized you are and what you're taking on. Now, if it's a couple, smaller weddings
Mhm.
and there's not a lot involved, I could probably do two or three at a time.
Oh,
However, I did make one mistake one year, and I did two in the month of July, not
oh,
realizing that they both requested it. One was because she was a friend, and one because she was a good client. And that was a lot. I mean, everything went off smoothly, but both contracts are for 40 rooms each.
oh
So
my.
to have that many people traveling and working with flights, hotels, and then making sure they're coordinating with the wedding department all in the same month, close
Mm,
to the same date, it wasn't even a couple weeks span. It was like, oh,
wow.
that's a lot. And those are a lot of documents you're having to get out and people to stay on top of. So you
Mhm,
could do it if you're really organized and you're excited and,
mhm,
you have everything in place. But would I do it again? I would have to think about it. I'm also mom and I have other clients, and
yes.
fortunately I'm with agency services too. And I don't
Mhm,
want to be a disservice to other clients as well, just because I overextended myself. So it's like anything, thinking about how many clients you have on your books per month. Um, think about the weddings and how much are involved as well.
mhm.
And because you have to remember those attrition dates. You
This is
you
so
don't
true.
want that to get past you because
Oh,
you've taken on too much and then you're stuck with these rooms, because you
yeah.
would be at fault for having to pay for those, and
That
nobody wants to
is
give up
yeah,
money.
that is thousands of dollars, that could cost you. So
Absolutely.
you're very
Yeah,
smart.
and
Yes.
that's not something you put back on the bride and groom because it's your fault, so you
Right.
would need to
Good.
be the one held accountable for it. So
Well, thank goodness that's never happened to you, and I predict that it never will. I don't
I
think it
hope
ever
not,
will.
Velma. I use a CRM and multiple calendars, so I'm old school and use still paper with
Yeah,
final payments are all in red, red Sharpie, but
lots
and then I
lots of
multiple
checks.
tasks.
Yeah, checks and balances. Well, Amy,
Absolutely.
I didn't even get to go into some of the other things I wanted to talk about. This went by so quickly,
Yeah,
so
it did.
I'm gonna have to have you back on sometime, hopefully soon, because
Happy to.
there are other areas that you could really share with our members that I think would be very helpful. And I
Well,
know
thank
you're
you.
crazy busy this time of year, and I really
Absolutely.
appreciate you taking this time out. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
And I would just like to say, make sure you're working with a preferred supplier, somebody that we vetted and that is good and that can assist you. And we know they will assist you, like FunJet, GoGo, Classic Vacations. Those are all suppliers that you can reach out to and have a fantastic groups department and also make your job easier with their online system. So those are things to really, really consider when you're looking for a group.
You're so right. Thank you so much for adding that. It's so important. It's so important.
Absolutely.
All right.
Perfect.
Well,
Well, Selma, I look forward to doing this again. Thank you for reaching out.
yeah. Well, you have a great and productive day.
You too.